Hi, everybody. It's really a privilege to be here. My name is Matthew Hart, and I'm from the Global Philanthropy Project. And we're a consortium of grant makers who work together to increase and improve the resources for LGBTI people around the world, especially in the global South and East. And I'm really nervous right now for some reason. But I love you all, so I think we're going to be doing great. Yeah. So before we get started, I just want to ask you all a question. If you wanted to think about how much money went into our movements over a 2-year period, how much would you think? 40 million? 400 million? 4 billion? 40 billion? Right? So let's get going. 40 million. Who thinks 40 million? Only a few. 400 million. 4 billion. Wow. Wow, okay, great. 40 billion. Wow, amazing. God, I want to work with you. So if you guessed 40 million over a 2-year period, you're right. I'm reading notes, which is very funny for me. So we're going to unpack this number together today. So right here is the New York Museum of Modern Art, right? It's a beautiful building. It's located in New York City, and it's undergoing a fantastic renovation right now. What do you think their estimated budget is for this? You can just shout it out. 3 million, 400 million. The animation. Here we go. So if you guessed around 400 million, you would be right. And in fact, they raised 650 million US dollars for this building. So let's just let that sink in. Over a 2-year period, our movements, the collective investment in our movements was $424 million, and this building raised 650. It's a lot of money. So there's a lot of ways to look at this, right? We can think, wow, people in New York love art. You also think, like, wow, there's not maybe nearly enough funding for our movements, and we have so much more to do. Or you could think, maybe despite all of the challenges and the lack of funding, we've done pretty darn good. So we all have a couple different perspectives on this, I'm sure, but I see this in a particular different way. And I think, finally, we have numbers that support what we've been saying all along. We are an under-resourced movement. And we have evidence now to use. And we're going to dig into that. If we can advance. There we go. So there's a lot of folks in this room, right? There's foundation folks, there's civil society folks, there's government people, and we all come to this work in different ways and from different places. And in fact, some of us come from lives that are complicated enough that even attending a conference like this was difficult, to get a visa, to get through the airport, to attend this conference itself, to afford to do that. But despite all of our differences, we're all working to ensure that LGBTI people can thrive in our own communities with dignity, with a lack of discrimination, harassment, and violence. And we're trying to get more resources to do this work, right? We're mobilizing those. And we need to demonstrate that urgency. And the numbers here are really valuable for that tool. So here's what I hope you really leave with today. So I want you to leave with an understanding of what data can do to help you do your work better. And I also want you to understand that knowledge on where to get that data and how to use it in your work. So what happens when we don't have data? Let's think about that. Who's ever written a grant proposal asking for money and trying to demonstrate need? Yeah, most of us, right? And it's hard to say there's a critical lack of resources for lesbian health funding if we don't have numbers that say how much money went to lesbian health funding. So now we have some of those numbers. And this is a huge change for us. And then at the macro level, if we don't have real numbers, misinformation can be sent out, and we have no way of countering that. There's no way to check it. So, many of us remember this article. In December 2015, the New York Times published this article. U.S. support for gay rights in Africa may have done more harm than good. Right? And it goes in to show that, or to claim, that $41 million in 3 years were invested in Africa from the US government. So what was included in these numbers? Where did these numbers come from? How, who's in charge of this money? Where did it go? We literally had no way to respond to these numbers, and we were over a barrel. So with articles like this, and many other trends around misinformation, we're in more and more danger. So we need our own data. And we need to be able to counter these arguments. So let me show you some of the data that we pulled together for a report called the Global Resources Report. This slide, the colors on this slide are sort of hard to read, but I guarantee you the report that you can download on the Global Philanthropy Project's website is much more clear. And we actually have a bunch of copies that you'll start seeing around starting today that you can take home. So for the first time ever, we collected more than 10,000 grants over a 2-year period from 2013 and 2014. And this map in particular shows the distribution of where those resources ended up in a grant-making practice globally. So I'll let you just take a look at that. And this particularly shows by region. I really want this to work. Is that right? Yes. Sorry, there you go. So this is an amazing slide, right? This shows that a total of $251 billion US by foundations were awarded for causes and issues, right? So all foundations, all causes, issues, 251 billion. Of all of that, only 13 cents per every 100 US dollar was for our communities, right? Hold that. And now for philanthropy, during that same period of time, same report, 2013, 2014, we're talking about 4 cents for every 100 US dollars out of 272 billion US dollars, right? So the scale of resources that we're talking that funds all of our work is very small. So this is a way we're kind of slicing up this data. What we wanted to do is help make tools by regions. And we didn't choose these regions randomly. These regions, there are 11 of them, they match the UN and other multilateral bodies regions. So we're really talking numbers to numbers, right? Bananas to bananas, apples to apples, all that stuff. And what we wanted to do is help really see where by region the resources are going. And we cut this up in 100 different ways. And so as we begin to look at it through the gaps and the opportunities that reveal themselves and where the money's going, it helps us understand better what's not being funded and where the real money's moving. And with hard numbers like this, it's easier and easier to make our case about what's underfunded and underutilized. Isn't that funny when you have a presentation and you point your clicker at the screen as if it's really going to do something? Yeah, I'm pointing at you now, I remember. So this slide shows by country level, right? And so this is just another example. And through this report, it's all through this report embedded at the country level. And what we wanted to do here is just show where the sources of money were and how much resources were going into each country. And so as individuals, we all live in a place, right? It's great to be able to see this number and also understand how we relate to other countries in our regions and so forth. And so this was a really Herculean effort, as you can imagine, to collect 10,000 grants from 13 donor governments and over 400 private foundations. But we did it, and we wanted to make this tool. And we wanted to make this tool for you all and for all of our work to mobilize additional resources. So I'm going to tell a little story. So at the Global LGBTI Human Rights Conference in Montevideo, we had the opportunity to share some of this data with government officials, civil society folks, and other representatives from foundations from around the world. Julia Ertz, who's here, hello. She's the executive director of Transgender Europe, and she referenced the report and the data many times to show how underfunded trans communities are, particularly in Europe. And she used it on numerous occasions, at donor events, side events for civil society, conversationally with governments, because that's what we were allowed to do. And the biggest reaction that Julia got as you can imagine? Shock and surprise, right? So Julie's advocating for more funding for trans work in Europe, and donors couldn't believe that there's a 10 times more money going to trans work in the United States than in Europe. And these are regions with comparable populations and wealth. So data and the lack of funding for trans work has been key to hook into a new conversation, to define the conversation based on the realities of money, less on impressions or false information. And I hope she's optimistic about the future, and I hope that this data too will be used more and more like that. So data has the power to really bring more resources to our communities, and it has the power to help us reimagine what philanthropic infrastructure could be built to help do that. So let me tell you a little bit of a story. I have so little time about the International Trans Fund, and here's why this is so exciting. So there's amazing trans organizations and individuals doing work all around the globe. And the vast majority of these organizations and projects have never received a single grant, right? So even of that 4 cents of every $100 within 271 billion US dollars, even that small amount of money, that did not get to some of the most innovative work. So the ITF was really built to respond to this. And larger funders who sometimes don't have the ability to make small grants work in this way, right? To respond to the needs and the opportunities of an emerging field by working with a group like the ITF. So the ITF can make more robust and diverse grants in 5 languages with a nimble and simpler application process. And I think we're actually going to have a launch of the ITF this evening at a reception. Hello. So can people from the ITF just stand up, actually, and we just have a little moment of applause? So thank you both. Thanks so much. So, I mean, the data played an enormous role in this. And I think we're lifting this up to show that data can really transform how we tell our stories and mobilize power and money to fill our movement with the resources necessary to make the changes that we've identified, right? So data from, so I'm at time. I hear that. So data will be used all across the ITF's work, and we're hoping that our next report, which should be coming out in about 20 months for 15-16, will contribute to this ongoing use of data and this utilization to leverage real numbers to build real power. And I also hope you see that all this information is easily available to you and usable in a variety of different ways and available on our website. So our goal of collecting this data is to support each of you in your unbelievable work. And I encourage you to talk with us at the Global Philanthropy Project of how our data and our work can be more supportive of you. And thank you.